I'm the flavor of the month, or every 2 months, I guess. Is that what we are? Okay.
What flavor are
And the title of my presentation, I thought a little bit about this, and actually this is really a composite. And so I've listed 3 other partners in crime here, but there's actually literally hundreds of folks that are involved in this. And so what I'm going to do is kind of share some of the background and research to where we are now with sage-grouse in the state. And this is really particularly important because the state is revising the sage-grouse management plan. And, 2013, there was the effort to put this plan together, and it reflected a lot of the best available knowledge at that time. And I just did a count since 2013, this coalition, and again, I should probably even have Randy Larson on here, from BYU, because he's part of this effort too. But the coalition has published 28 papers on sage-grouse, and so I think about Dan Ash. I can remember Dan. Anybody remember Dan Ash? Director of Fish and Wildlife Service. He now is the head of the executive director of the American Zoo Association. You didn't know that. But he said, hey, the science is done. I can remember him saying this at several meetings, the science is done, the science. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? So anyway, let's get into this here. I'm here. Why this is important here is because in 1999, the Berryman Institute got a state appropriation of $75,000. In 2000, that was increased to $125,000, and over time, given inflation, it's grown to $190,000. But that money that we got to the Berryman Institute went to extension, and somebody in their infinite wisdom gave it to me. Anyway, but what I did with that money is I leveraged that money throughout time and space and everything. And most of that money went to the development of the local working groups. It went to support research. There are people in this room that had helped fund part of their research. And so that leveraged over time translated into about $15 million in supporting research and local working group efforts in the state of Utah since really 1999. And so that's pretty cool. And so this year we're going to go after some more money. I've convinced the powers at Utah State that this is a good investment, not only for the Berryman Institute, but for the state. And so I have some publications here, the new publication that's entitled Cosmopolitan Coyotes. I'm making a push, but I'm going to hand copies around. And so the Institute is some information there. Mike Conover, the former director, in his wisdom, started the journal, and it's really become a pretty good placeholder for management information. I think it does a better job than the Wildlife Society Bulletin, Journal of Wildlife Management, because it represents a composite of articles not only in the United States but worldwide. And so just this last year I invited states to do state subscriptions, and I have 6 states that have already committed $1,000 for an annual subscription to the journal, and that includes a 50% reduction in page charges. This journal is open access; it's funded on page charges, but it really, I want it to be. I'm now the editor in chief. I want it to be the wildlife manager's Bible, if you will. And so our next issue is going to come out shortly. It's going to talk about community-based conservation range-wide, and it's going to have stories in there about wolves and stuff like that. And the one after that is going to be a really bestseller because it's going to be on wild horses and burros. And so wild horses and burros is an interesting topic. And this is by way of introduction. This is, and so nobody was here to introduce me, so I get to do it myself. And so
Terry, you need no introduction.
Mike Steiler talked to me a few months ago. He said, "Hey, we got to do a summit on wild horses. We got to put that topic together." And so I thought, "Oh hell yeah, let's do it." So anyway, we did this summit, and it was by invitation only. And so this is I've never been granted Grammy'd. Not a Grammy Award, but a Grammy. And so I got one, and actually I got one through the governor's office, and I got one through Utah State. And so I had to help the governor's office, and I don't remember the young lady's name, the council, but I helped her respond to it. And then she sent me a copy of it, and every part in there where it had a difficult question, it said, contact Utah State University. And so we had one, and I had to respond to it, and so there were the little folks at Utah State that got a little excited about, you know, some sunshine laws about where everything's supposed to be visible and stuff like that. But anyway, I weathered that, but I wanted to share this because I have a whole new set of fans out there. And this is what they're saying about me, and the other guy there is Eric Thacker in the corner there, and then below that is Representative Stewart, and I think that's Secretary Zinke. But anyway, I have, I jokingly call myself the Rhinestone Cowboy now because I'm getting cards and letters from people I don't even know. You know, that Glenn Campbell song, if you ever heard that. So, but anyway, let's get into where we're at. In 2015, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service punctuated decade-long, actually probably be 2-decade-long effort on greater sage-grouse. And you know, they came out in 2005 and said, not warranted, and then they got sued, and they came out in 2010 and said warranted, and then they said, well, you got to make another decision. And then 2015, they came out and they punctuated with this decision, and here's the ban rule. And so anyway, as part of that, one of the things that was a big interest was regulatory certainty. You know, that the service somehow couldn't accept the fact that a state like Utah, with something as aggressive as the Watershed Restoration Initiative, could do anything good for sage-grouse. I mean, there wasn't this assurance that maybe that money might end up, you know, buying a bunch of wild horses and burros or something like that. And so they didn't understand the magnitude of WRI, they didn't understand the pretense, they didn't understand the commitment and passion behind it. And so the BLM in 2013 started this process. Actually 2012, they started the revisions of the RMPs, the resource management plans, and then also the Forest Service with their land use plans. And so they came up with this doctrine. And so this doctrine basically was built on Conley's et al. Guidelines. We're going to talk a little bit about that, why that's kind of an issue. But it also established a habitat assessment framework. It said that basically in the next 5 years, BLM, the Forest Service are going to go back and they're going to revisit everything, every action on federal land. And so in Utah, that's not only oil and gas, but it's 525 permits covering about 5 million acres on BLM and Forest Service land. And so they have to revisit all the grazing allotments. And so the importance or the implication of that's going to become pretty important as I go through some of this stuff. Well, and lo and behold, Senator Zinke just released executive, was it the executive order? Did they do that, executive order?
Secretarial order.
Secretarial order, okay. And said, hey, we're gonna go back and we're gonna go check this thing out again, you know. And so that's under review right now, and we don't know what's gonna happen. Here's kind of what's happened in Utah with sage-grouse data, and all these data points. This is a thing that was put together by Dave Dahlgren, and so it just kind of shows you a composite of where some of the research has been done. And so a lot of these were very high frequency transmitters, the little necklace collars that were put on, you know, and so, but to date we've got about these kind of locations out there where we physically had to have a graduate student go back in and check on the bird and follow the bird, and you know, sometimes you couldn't get him up in the morning, like, you know, Dahlgren started his work at noon every day, you know, and so we got some bias, and so I'm just kidding. But anyway, a while back we sat down and we thought about this. You know, Dave and I and some of the folks got together and we said, well, how does this all relate together? And so we came up with this really insightful diagram. And so this kind of shows how these things have been all connected, you know, the research, and it should say also BYU research there, and I apologize for our BYU colleagues, but all of this research was linked, and so all of these topics there have been gone into this research, they've fed into the state plan, they will continue to feed into any revisions of the state plan. They're also fed directly into the RMPs, and I'll talk about how that happened and how we made some mistakes. We made some mistakes. We're gonna talk about some of those mistakes today also. I didn't make them, Dave made them and other people, Jason made them. But anyway, Utah's approach has been this: we've got a state plan, we protect about 7.5 million acres in sage-grouse management areas. And here's some of the measures of the plan. This plan was elevated from a division plan in 2009. Actually, Dean Mitchell sitting back there started in 2002. I remember our first trip about sage-grouse.
1996.
Did you ever tell anybody about that trip?
1996, Dove Creek,
Yeah,
Colorado.
we jumped into a truck and we went down to Dove Creek, Colorado to talk to a guy named Clay Brown. You know Clay? You ever heard of Clay? And we said, hey Clay, we want to talk to you about helping out. And what did he say, Dean?
He said, Utah, you're on your own.
Yeah, he said, you're on your own. We thought, what the hell? So anyway, so we got two biologists that want to be sociologists to deal with people, you know, and putting together these things. But anyway, so we did. We muddled through. Here's kind of what the sage-grouse management areas look at. We've all seen this, and so those little areas in the blue are areas of disagreement with the federal RMP. You know, the RMP process, they went out and they developed some priority habitat areas and some general habitat areas, and the Utah plan focused on the COT report, and the COT report said, identify those areas where you can do some really good. Identify those solid areas where you've got the potential, where you've got the opportunity to grow sage-grouse, okay? And so I think the plan did that. Ellen Clark helped shepherd that. Bob Budd came over, and then after he left, he kept criticizing the Utah plan because it didn't look like Wyoming's. And he doesn't even respond to my emails anymore, by the way. But the focus is that, hey, you know what, Dorothy, you're not in Wyoming anymore, you know, the Wizard of Oz kind of thing. And he didn't understand the differences in the landscapes. And I went over to help Dave capture some birds for translocation to North Dakota as part of another project. And holy cow, they got sage-grouse in Wyoming. It was like another world. And they got wild horses too. But, you know, so anyway, so what I'm going to go through is a litany of different things here, and I'm going to try to make this fairly quick. I know you guys, we've only got an hour here, and each one of these could be a seminar, you know, for the future. We'll do some of these ones. So anyway, so I'm just going to go through some of the research and highlight some of the high points and some of the low points. Well, anybody remember seeing this document? We had a good discussion about it today about how, that's what it really looks like now. You know, maybe we need to think about, we talked about wanting to grow the population to 5,000 birds, and you know, as we grow habitat, as we produce habitat, we're also still losing some habitat. And so maybe we need to rethink that thought process about stabilizing the population and focusing on things to stabilize population. And that's good. I mean, that's not a bad thing to do. But you know, in the plan we touted, well, we're going to do this, and we kind of took the bold initiative where we set some population objectives, and now we maybe need to go back and think about what those objectives really mean in reality, and what we're talking about, because we know our populations do this. They do this. And then sometimes we just get better at counting. Since 2007, we've identified like 50 new leks in the state. You know, and so we're finding more leks out there, you know. And even in Wyoming, there's leks they don't even count. You know, they have so many, they just don't count, you know. So anyway, a lot of work, you know, we cut our teeth on this stuff with Parker Mountain. Went down with Dean, you know, gosh, 97, late at night, and went to the Parker Mountain folks, talked to the Grazing Association down there, and they cut us a check for $3,000. And so we took the $3,000, and Dean put some money in it. We went to BLM, we went to the Forest Service, and before you know it, we had a graduate student studying Parker Mountain. And then over time, we got a progression. We got about 12 years of studies, and we looked at the whole landscape out there and the population. And so what we looked at is this population stable? And so here's some work that was done by Dave, and basically we got a stable lambda where we looked at those 12 years of population. But the big thing came out of this is that there's certain birds that get it right all the time, that get it right. that they are capable of bringing off a brood every year. And then why we got concerned about this is because you guys were shooting them. Not you guys, but we had a season that was an early season. And what was happening is, you know, when a hunter goes out and he flushes this sage-grouse brood, mama takes off first, you know, and bingo, mama is getting nailed. And so the state wildlife board, Jason went to him and he knocked that season back a couple of weeks, you know, just to get out of this little small group into larger groups, you know. And so that's science at its best. But the big thing that came out of it, and this is some work that Dave put together and was published in the Ecosphere, it demonstrated that lek counts, male-based lek counts, can track the female major season of population. In other words, you can use male-based lek counts to document population change and population response to conservation actions. First one ever to do that. You know, and we could do it because we had the data set. And we had some really, really smart people who can handle that data. And he's not talking to you now, so one of those smart ones. He actually, we lost him, but hopefully we'll get some other folks back. Dave's actually pretty sharp too, so. But anyway. Wow. Hey, that's a compliment.
Did you drive with him up here, by the way?
See, I don't have to ride back with him.
And did you drive?
Okay, so maps. Maps are all important. You saw the map before, you saw the 7.5 million acres of disagreement. So what we've done in the last couple of years, we took all this VHF data and we got together in some discussions and Jason Avery and others, and then we sent the maps out across the state. And we wanted to get some idea about where is the best habitat based on our VHF locations. Now with VHF locations, you know you've got bias, right? Because you're only sampling part of the population and you're only sampling at the times when you can get out there. And so we don't have a lot of data during the winter because, you know, nobody wants to go out in the winter and track sage-grouse. Well, sometimes you just can't get to them, you know. And so anyway, what we did is we sent this seasonal habitat map out and we created an interim map based on these kind of characteristics. And so it went out to all the biologists and it was field validated. And so basically the idea was to create a better map, to map these high priority areas and break them down into seasonal habitats and habitat use. But create one map, not two, not three, you know, because the BLM's got one and the Forest Service has got one, and you know, and so the idea is let's put this together. I mean, maybe some of these areas that we're calling general habitat, we need to get rid of them. Maybe they're not meeting the purpose. Yeah, we have birds there, okay? But the argument is, can we protect every bird? Is there enough money out there to protect every bird? And where can we put our priorities and where can we get the biggest gain, okay? So the other part about this is that, okay, you got a map and you say habitat's there, well, what about the habitat? What about it? Well, I mean, you could go back to Conley et al., and where was Conley et al. Guidelines developed? And here's Utah. We got a different ballpark. Anybody watch the World Series, the Astros and the Dodgers?
That's a
and
sore
different...
subject. Let's move
Oh,
on.
Hey, I was hoping the Twins were going to win, but you know. Anyway, we got these guidelines, and so what we went in all of these areas, we've collected the habitat data the same way that other states have done it, and that was used in the Conley et al. Guidelines to map the guidelines, because you have to be consistent. You just can't change things and try to compare it. So anyway, we went in, and this is Dave's map. The BLM came to us and said, well, we need to do a different map. We need to have some different guidelines for these areas. And so what Dave did is he came up with these ecoregions, these physiographic regions, and so there's like 7 of them. And so holy cow! We ended up having 7 different sets of guidelines for these areas based on location in the state. And we felt somewhat comfortable with them, and then we compared them to Conley et al., and the BLM said, you're damn right, we're going to take them. And the Forest Service said, bullshit. we don't believe you. And I would say that even if the Forest Service was in here. Are there any Forest Service people in here? Okay. I would say that anyway, and I've said it before. I've told John Shibbick and I've told Ron that, you guys need to kind of think about this a little differently. So, anyway, we're in the process of right now, we have a paper getting ready to submit where we've broken this out, and rather than an eco-region, a physiographic region, we've developed habitat clusters. And this habitat clusters is tied to what? What do you think these vegetation habitat clusters are tied to?
Wild horses.
What's that?
Wild horses.
Yeah, close. You mean like a wild ass idea? Is that what you're talking about? No, the elevation. Makes sense, right? As you move up in elevation, and so we think that this approach will provide a better mechanism of mapping guidelines, not only in Utah, but in other states where we have these elevational habitats. And so this is something that is going to come out, where we're going to submit it. We're ready to almost submit it. I mean, we've been working on this stuff like forever, it seems like. And so, anyway, this is a cool thing here because there's very few people range wide. They've been mapping the problems. Oh, we got a conservation problem. Oh, if we get, this is going to happen. We're going to lose this sage-grouse. And so they've been focusing on the threats. And so we thought, let's focus this on response to management. The state has an ambitious plan to talk about sage-grouse habitat work. And here's one of the objectives. Protect 10,000 acres of sage-grouse habitat, quality sage-grouse habitat. Pretty bold, pretty bold. Okay? Here's some that are even bolder. We're talking 75,000 acres a year of habitat enhancement and habitat improvement. And we've been pretty good at doing some of these things, but maybe we've been trying to do too much. And maybe we should think about focusing those into some areas where are highest priority, where based on some of the work we've done, maybe we can take the same amount of money or less and put it into an area and get 2 or 3 times the benefit in terms of sage-grouse production. And so that's kind of where we're thinking about going with some of this stuff. And I'll tell you why we think we can do this, okay? Okay, Parker Mountain Adaptive Management. Here's a study showing some of the response of some treatments we did in 2006. In 2000, not 6, we did it in 2002, 2003, where we actually went in and treated sagebrush. And it's like, oh, you can't do that, you can't treat it. Well, this is a mountain big sagebrush, higher elevation. And so we monitor the response, and this is some of Dave's work. And this last work was done by Nate DeFon, where he actually looked at long-term effect. And so in some of these areas that we treated in 2002, 2003, we're still seeing a really good population response in terms of the forbs and grasses. And we're also seeing a really good response in terms of sage-grouse use. So in some of these big mountain sagebrush areas where we've done treatments, we've had a really continued response. And so green groceries, the more you know, the more you grow. And here's a comparison to the reference area. So you look at these, and these are bird dog point trans that Dave has been working for a number of times. And so this is another one of those papers that we're going to put together. And Dave, feel free to jump in here if I'm understating or overstating something here. So. Okay, conifer encroachment, big one, big one. Range-wide, Utah has removed more conifers than the entire western states combined. Over 500,000 acres of conifers have, you can hear them scream, anyway. But we've removed that much. So the question is that's a big part of our plan. And one of the threats in our SGMAs, we identified that 35% of our SGMAs have been impacted by conifer encroachment. 35% of the 7.5 million acres. So just do the math. What it comes out of how many acres of conifer encroachment. Now, Ellen Clark is here. I thought, did you come in, Ellen? Right here. What did you say, how many acres of Utah are being impacted by conifers every year? What was your number? What number did you throw out?
I can't remember.
100,000. And we're
Per year growing.
Yeah. We're whacking
100,000.
about 75,000 acres. So you see how we're kind of not even keeping par with the course. So then the question becomes, well, maybe we need to prioritize where we're whacking conifers, right? Okay. So anyway, conifer removal, the big question was, does it work? Does it achieve the results? The idea behind conifer removal is we get rid of the trees, sage-grouse start using the areas, the forbs and grass comes back, and all right, we get an increase in nest success, and we get an increase in brood success, and we ultimately see an increase in population. Well, we actually did a study where we combined several years of work, and we used some of Avery's data, Brian Wing's data, Charlie Sanford's data, and lo and behold, we found out that those birds that are using areas near conifer removed areas are having higher nest and higher brood success. Eureka! That's like a double helix moment. It is, because this is the first study range-wide that's demonstrated. I can remember Steve Knick's 2014 paper came out and said, you can't do it. If you use conifer removal, it's going to take decades for the birds to respond and the habitat to respond. And so anyway, right, Steve? No, anyway, I like Steve. But he was using, his data set was a little wrong, so. Okay, prioritizing treatments, and this comes into where compensatory mitigation. Okay, so these two maps show basically an area where we've got habitat, high habitat use or preferences, and those are the areas that are the red shaded. And so what we went in, and if we went in and we removed all the conifer, all the phase 1 conifer in the area, it showed how that area would be enhanced. But we probably don't have enough money to do that, right? And so what we did is combine the two maps and said, by identifying those areas where we've got corridors, where we've got the greatest potential to grow some of the existing habitat, let's take our conifer treatments and let's focus in some of those areas. Avery published a paper this last year that talked about the importance of having these conifer treatments in areas where you have, one, sage-grouse, which Connect didn't have, two, you're close to mesic habitats. And so the idea of combining all of these things together, so when you start talking about mesic habitats, maybe we can also use this prioritization tool to focus on placing these mesic habitats, these beaver dam analogs that we're pushing right now, that everybody's trying to create the mesic areas. We think with enough data that we can not only prioritize conifer treatments, we can also come up with a tool to prioritize mesic area treatments, and we could also come up with a tool to prioritize grazing treatment. And that's a story that's still unfolding about grazing, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing on grazing right now. So, oh, and here it is, grazing grass height. 87% of the available sage-grouse range is grazed by wild horses and birds. No, it's grazed by domestic livestock. And that's a big issue. We just did a paper, and I don't know if I've got it in here, we just did a paper where Seth Detmeyer has been doing some work out at Deseret Land and Livestock, and I'll talk a little bit about his work. He went in, I think I've got it here, he went in and he analyzed all the records worldwide about grazing and grouse, trying to find out if there was a direct impact, a direct effect. In other words, nest success, brood success, chick survival, adult mortality. And worldwide, he searched, and he found 3 papers, and they were, and I have it here. They were on red grouse in Europe. But anyway, do I go to that? Yeah, here it is. Oh God, I got ahead of myself. Anyway, here's the analysis that he went through, and this was published in Ecology and Evolution, and it showed out that the effects on red grouse. Well, we published this, and then we sent it out. We thought, well, what this showed is that we needed to do some work on grazing. We needed to get some better information about grazing, rotation, timing, utilization, production, how it relates to sage-grouse. And so basically it said that, to quote Dan Ash, the science has not been done. And so we sent it out to our livestock producers and stuff, and they weren't very happy with the paper. And so Dave had a discussion with some of our producers out in West Box Elder, and they didn't like how some of the language was said, because we did say that there is an impact. I mean, these studies documented an impact, but what they only read the abstract. They didn't read the whole paper. And so, but sometimes you write an abstract because you want people to read the whole paper. You didn't want to piss them off, but that's what happened. We pissed them off. So anyway, but having said that, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So what Dave did working with Randy and other folks, we went back and we looked at desert land and livestock. Because desert land and livestock's been touted as, that's Mecca, grazing in Mecca. You know, the idea that they've changed their grazing system from season long to rest rotation. And so they've got some days, some pastures get 400 days of rest. And so every year about 25% of the pasture got rested. And then they've done some of these small little treatments. And so Rick Danver put together a couple little papers, but it never really got published, and it was very, very critical. And so when you look over here, when they started doing all these treatments in the grazing rotation, these are what happened close by in Rich and also Wyoming. And this is what was happening with Deseret in terms of the leg counts, okay? It was unbelievable. I can remember when we had the entourage tour where we bought the regional director of the Fish and Wildlife Service, Region 6, I can't remember her, what's her name again?
Maureen?
Noreen, yeah, we brought Noreen out, and we had Bill Hopkins present this data, and he presented this data, but what he did is he just presented it to here. He cut it off like about 2010. He didn't tell the rest of the story, you know, like what's that guy, Harvey? Paul Harvey. Oh, and this is the rest of the story. And so I was sitting next to Lorene, and she said, "Wow, this is fantastic." And so I didn't have the heart to rain on Bill's parade. And so after everybody left, went to their hotel rooms, I sat down with Bill and I said, "Bill, here's what happened in the last 3 years, the population crashed." And he's like, and so the next day we had to explain to the Fish and Wildlife Service that everything's not all good. You know, we've had a couple problems. We had maybe a lot of sagebrush treated. We had some winters that started in June and ended in June. And so we had a lot of overwinter mortality, which you typically don't have in sage-grouse populations. And so that population crashed, and it's still kind of struggling. It's still kind of struggling to recover. So anyway, but this is some of the results that showed out about some of the treatments. Deseret, most of the BLM treatments are run on a season-long grazing pasture where you take the cows, you flat them out, and then you come pick them up. You know, when you're told to get off of there or based on the season. Well, Deseret uses a rotational system, and so back in 2011 we started looking at this system from a study standpoint, trying to compare the infamous Three Creeks with Deseret. And so I understand my recent discussions with BLM is Three Creeks EA is getting close to being signed. And the idea that if it's signed, what's going to happen, it's going to convert to a Deseret type system. Three Creeks is about 46,000 acres, and Deseret's about 200,000. But the idea behind this is that if you in a semi-desert system, if you change the grazing to focus on the grass and focus on sustaining that grass cover, what effects would that have on sage-grouse over time? And so that was the purpose of our study. And so these are some assessed results. Deseret, we looked at nest survival, and so there's the survival rates. Over the 4 years of study, Deseret had a higher survival rate in sage-grouse populations. Actually, it was like 20%, but from a statistical standpoint, because of our sample size, it's only significant at a 0.1 alpha instead of a 0.05. But we think it's biologically significant, and so we're doing some further analysis on that right now. Clearly, Deseret had more biomass, more sagebrush, more bunch grass, and more forbs than Three Creeks. But the models didn't pick that up as a significant factor. What the models did pick up was Deseret is hotter, and it receives 1.5 inches of rainfall, and it's grazed at twice the stocking rate as Three Creeks, and it still had higher nest survival. And so we're still working some of the model work on that, and we're hoping to get some of that out. The other thing that came up with these guidelines, these habitat guidelines, anybody heard about the 7-inch double height? The Forest Service is really tied to this idea about 7-inch double height, that it's got to have 7, and that's sage-grouse habitat. Well, Gibson et al. out of Nevada, they published a paper that said, "Oh, guys, we've been doing this wrong. What we've been doing is when we go out and we measure the vegetation at a nest, or the sage-grouse nest, we measure at the time of nest fate. So if a bird is successful and it nests earlier in the spring, what happens to the grass around that nest over time? Over the 30-some days, 37, 38 days it's on the nest. It freaking grows. And if you have a nest that was initiated and you discover it and it gets hit by a predator and you measure the grass height at the time that that predator at that nest site was determined, what do you think you're gonna do? You're gonna create a whole lot of bias in your sample size. A whole lot of bias. And so there's a lot of studies that have been published that said grass height matters in terms of nest success. We're not saying that grass height doesn't matter and it's not important, but from the standpoint of using that as a metric of nest success, So we collaborated with Dave Noggle and other folks range-wide, and we looked at all of those study areas, and basically we analyzed greater than 700 or 900 nests, and overall we found that there really wasn't this relationship between grass height and nest success that we've been reporting in the literature for so long. And you think that, well, that should have been pretty obvious, right? All these sage-grouse biologists going out there measuring grass height and stuff, it should have been obvious, but it wasn't. You know, it wasn't. And so we now are measuring nest at nest fate, and we're all vegetation nest fate, but we're also measuring at the time of the projected hatch rate. And how Settinger and group and Gibson were able to find it out, you know what they did? They flushed sage-grouse off nests. In their study, they had 70% nest abandonment, which is really high, and we don't ever do, because it, you know, if we flush a bird off a nest, you know, she may or may not come back. In most cases, she doesn't come back. You know, and so we have an abandoned nest, and so we bias that. But because they did that, and they were able to candle the eggs, and I don't know if they candled them or floated them, but anyway, they were able to determine nest fate, and so they got some pretty interesting information, which, you know, they sacrificed 70% of their nest for it, but it was pretty good. Okay, power lines. We've done a lot of work in Utah about seasonal movements, and so this is some of the stuff that we published. And what we basically found out is that the populations with nests, in larger populations with more area, guess what? They move farther. This pointed out the importance of usable space in our habitat treatments. The idea that the work we're doing has to focus on, even with our SGMAs, it has to focus on increasing the usable space, increasing the connection, the mobility of those populations to use that space. And there are some treatments that are better than others. You know, you hear about real estate, location. It applies to sage-grouse too. It really does. You know, a lot of the treatments in the past, we've gone out and we've looked at treatment sites and said, well, the sage-grouse is decadent here. We need to treat it, or we need to do something here, but without really any data behind that, okay? And so in the last 20 years, because of the work of 45 plus graduate students and a lot of other folks, we're getting to the point where now we have a data set, a body of knowledge where we can start really looking at some of these relationships and going back and even looking at the state plan, Mike. You know, I mean, with the state plan, we're going to go back and, you know, we got to revisit it. Well, maybe some of the assumptions we thought about that Ellen Clark tried to convince us in 2013 were correct. Maybe he was just wrong. Everybody's looking at you.
You'll get nothing from him.
So, but anyway, so
I'll
power
blame
lines.
Jason.
You know, power line buffers. How do power lines affect sage-grouse? In Utah, we have a lot of power lines, and a lot of these power lines run through areas, and here's an example of a power line. The red line is a huge transmission line. You know, these are the large, you know, KV lines that are running across, and those little dots are those little distribution lines that are 45 kV or something like that are taking power from a substation, from a large transmission line, and they're delivering it to the end user, you know, to the cities and stuff. And so how does that affect? You know, Steve Kinnick published a paper and said that basically the ecological effect of power lines is 10 kilometers each side of the road, each side of the power line. So based on his assessment, he said that the ecological effect of power lines in the sage-grouse landscape is 50%. In other words, 50% of all the entire habitat, sage-grouse habitat, is adversely affected by power lines. And how did he come up with the 10-kilometer buffer? That's how far a raven flies. Okay, a perched raven, on average, can fly 10 kilometers, will fly 10 kilometers during a bout. So you've got a 20-kilometer radius at a raven. And so he did. He based it on work. If you go back and look at his paper, he quoted Steinhoff, and he quoted View et al., and he quoted a couple other folks, which looked at eagle foraging, and so, well, that's okay. That's okay. But you have to tie it to the data sets. And so, and again, when you look at a power line, there's a large transmission line. You know, there's some power lines that are visible to the birds and others that are not visible to the birds. And so we went back in and we looked at our lek persistence data. We looked at our breeding population data. We looked at nest success. We looked at brood success. And we've actually come up with some numbers that actually is going to be submitted to PLOS One here, hopefully next week. But basically, it suggested a buffer zone in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 kilometers. Power line. In other words, if you're going to put a power line in a new area, a new existing power line, where should you put it? You should put it in the corridor that you've got the one already. Okay? And if you're going to be moving distribution lines from Lex, you need to maintain a buffer of about 1 to 2 kilometers from that line. And so that translates into what, about 0.6 of a mile, half a mile to a mile. So that's not bad. In 1969, a bunch of drunk biologists in Wyoming got together and they came up with a recommendation of a 1/4 mile. I don't know if they were correct or not, but they came up with a recommendation of a 1/4 mile buffer. So 0.6, 1/4 mile, it's not too bad. But now we actually have some recommendations based on buffers. And the other thing, guess what we found out in doing this analysis, which is not really rocket science. Guess what mitigates disturbance development? What do you think mitigates habitat disturbance? Good habitat. There was a habitat response here. There was a habitat response. That disturbance, avoidance can be mitigated by good habitat. So you start thinking about some of these transmission lines running across hundreds of thousands of acres of rangeland in like Nevada or Utah. If we change the grazing system, where the grazing system went from a season long to provide better habitat for sage-grouse, could that be used as a mitigation factor for power lines? So we can come up with a BMP, but it also suggests that if habitat's important, what kind of things can we do to have it? Maybe we do some conifer treatments in areas where we've got these transmission lines. The Falcon Gunner, Gateway West, Pacific Corp proposed Gateway West. The BLM for the Gateway West line running across Nevada, they wanted $500 million in mitigation to put that line in. 500 million mitigation, and when it's based on this 20-kilometer buffer about the impact. That's probably not the best science, and definitely the power company, Pacific Corp, is not going to build a power line that they're going to have to pay $500 million in mitigation just to build a line. Because ultimately, who's going to pay for that? Everybody in this room is going to pay for it. I mean, they're not a bank. I mean, they're not a charity. They're a bank, you know, so they're gonna pass it on to the end user. So, ecological minimums. We're doing some work to revisit Knick's paper on ecological minimums. Now, what Steve did in his paper is he used Lex, and so he used all the Lex. He used all the Lex that he had data sets from like 1999 to 2007, and so he trained the models based on Lex location. So we thought, well, he probably made an error for Utah. And so, because he didn't have these extra 50 Lex that we found since 2007, and so we added those Lex to the database, and what happened is that the model performed so poorly that we thought, oh, wait a minute, you know, that's not going to work. If Utah or Nevada or Wyoming doesn't have access to the Lex data from the other states, what can you use instead? Breeding habitat, breeding data. And so we added breeding data to the models that Knick did, and actually we got a pretty good performing model that still suggests the most important feature on the landscape is sagebrush cover, maintaining your sagebrush canopy cover. We also are redefining the terms between development and disturbance. Knick's paper was used to come up with a disturbance cap of 3-5%. And Steve in his paper used the word development. Development means permanent change in that landscape. In other words, where you've got a town, a city, or something along that line. And that's how it's defined in land fire. But the service extrapolated that, and the BLM extrapolated that to equate to disturbance on the landscape. And so what's a disturbance? Could a habitat project be considered a disturbance? Could a fire be considered a disturbance? The state plan has a condition in there that if we got an area that burned and we can't restore that area within, what, 5 years, Ellen? Then it would be lumped into the disturbance category. And so we're going through, we're gonna run some things, but clearly sagebrush cover was important. Conifer cover, gotta get rid of the conifers. Riparian cover is important. And agriculture cover, you know, agriculture disturbance in the landscape still has an impact on populations. And so we're gonna come up with some new measures for different disturbance and development, and we're gonna define that in that paper, which hopefully will set an example on how a state can do this type of stuff if they don't have access to the other state sage-grouse data, playground data. And last but not least is the framework. Within the RMPs, the BLM and the Forest Service have committed to reevaluating habitat, which requires them to go back in and look at these habitats and create some better maps and some better information about the impacts. And so we're collaborating statewide now with you know, BLM, Forest Service a little bit. We got a little bit of money out of the Forest Service, the division, BYU, and we put out, how many GPS transmitters now, Dave? 300 or?
We've had a little over 300 total since we began putting out GPS transmitters.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to use all of that information to create better maps on seasonal habitat availability. But what we're going to go in is we're going to look at focusing on, again, addressing this issue of sampling bias. We have a lot of managers that we have these GPS locations, and again, you know, they've given money to buy the transmitter, and so they want the data points. And why they want the data points is because they want to use those data points to plan a habitat project. Okay, again, the data points that we're collecting represent a sample of that population. And the idea is, how can you get something out of that data point to extrapolate to the entire population where you can actually do something, say something confident about the projects that you're going to do. And so one of the things you can do is you can look at resource selection analysis, where you take those data points, those characteristics of the habitat that those birds are using, and you extrapolate it beyond the landscape. So rather than just looking at the point, the location of the bird, you look at what that location point tells you about the habitat quality in that particular area. And then you model that across the landscape to create these heat maps, if you will, which show some of the priority areas that these birds are keen in on. I mean, we can't radio color every sage-grouse in Utah, though we probably tried. I think in Sheeprock we're trying to do that, right? We're trying to radio color everyone. But the idea here is that but again, managers still want some of this information, and so what we've done is we've created a system where if a manager requests this information, you know, they've got a project they're thinking about planning, like we've got requests out of the Sheeprock and other areas. The postdoc, Michael Cole, is working on this. We'll actually go in and we'll do a preliminary resource selection function analysis on that area to kind of show and give them some of these areas are heat maps. The goal for this effort is in 2019 is what we want to do is we want to remap the entire state using this process and develop, if you will, a resource selection function model for the entire state that identifies our priority areas, that help us prioritize habitats in terms of the dollars spent. I mean, we don't have it yet because we just put these transmitters out right now and we're collecting data, but we're collaborating on a statewide level. I mean, the level of collaboration and partnership on this is really phenomenal. The database is so large. We're talking, you know, we talk about 20,000 locations based up. We're talking 500,000. By the time we're done with this, we're going to be millions of. And so we're working out a relationship with BYU. We're going to house the data on their main server. You know, and so we're going to create some kind of but again, part of this is we want to provide a service to the manager where we can go in, and if there's a request for information in an area where, you know, WR projects want to get set up, well, where are you looking at? So we can run this and we can do it fairly quickly because we've got the models and stuff set up. All we need to do is input the data. And we can provide some of the interpretation of what the data means, So anyway, this is about the field request. Here's some products that are gonna come out, and there's, you know, I was criticized early on by a lot of folks range-wide, well, how come Utah's not publishing any of this data? How come you're not publishing any of your sage-grouse data? And every graduate student who does a 2-year project, they have a thesis and stuff, but sometimes that little paper, it's not publishable anymore because somebody's already done it, Sage-grouse use sagebrush. Oh, no kidding, yeah, they use sagebrush, And so with this data set, what's happened is how we've collected it and how we've managed it over time and how we stored it. It's accessible to the state, but it also provides a body of data that there's things that you can do with it that 10 years ago, we didn't have the data mass, the critical mass to do it. And so using real data of Utah populations, because we have so much information about the populations, I am very confident we're going to be able to come up to amendments to the plan that are solid amendments that are based on best available science. And that's what we argued, Alan, right? We argued with the service to this whole plan development, best available science, and they kept throwing USGS stuff. And again, USGS is doing good stuff, but it was 30,000 foot level stuff. And given Utah's populations and the variability we have in populations statewide, you can't do that. I mean, we got some birds like Morgan Summit birds. I mean, those birds stay home. They don't. We got a couple of them that winter in some pretty weird areas, but most of them stay in that area. And so we don't have a lot of opportunity in Morgan Summit to do habitat projects, but we have a lot of interest in doing development projects, building condos and stuff like that. And if we have those kind of activities proceed in that area, we're going to lose that population. Because it's just got, and it's productive. It's one of the most productive populations that we've got in terms of, Brandon Flack, who just got a job in Idaho, working out of Mountain Home. He had 37 nests out of 30 hens in 1 year. And we're talking about 60% nest success and 60% brood success. And that population, but why wasn't it growing? We still don't know why. With that kind of numbers, we would expect this population just to be, but it's not. There's still something happening in that population. And so we think we might have a problem with some of that survival, yearling juvenile survival. So anyway, the more you know, the more you grow. And that's it. Any questions? Well, that was easy. But it's been fun. I mean, and this was a partnership. It's not, I've been so fortunate to, working with Dean and Ellen and Jason and Ava Dahlgren, Avery. But it's just really, and yesterday I did a seminar in the College of Natural Resources about collaboration, partnerships, and I think collaboration is a good term, but usually with collaboration it implies that folks are in it for themselves. In other words, if things are going well, everybody's happy with it. But if something goes wrong, they do this. It's their fault. And what I think we have here is really a partnership. I still have one of these. Oh, okay. A partnership is where everybody shares in the pain and they share in the benefits. And so if something goes wrong, you're willing to accept it and willing to say, well, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we need to go back and rethink about some of these things. And it's we, it's not I. And at the same time, what we've been able to demonstrate is that out of this money that I've talked about that's gone into this, about 25% of it has come from the Division of Wildlife Resources. But these other partners that I've listed here have put some money into the process also. And yeah, they want something out, they want a product out of it. But they're also willing to own that product and own what comes out of it. And I think that's pretty cool. And I Ellen's got a paper that's going to come out about about WRI and the importance of that partnership, why it works, and there's some really, really good information. And actually, it's gonna be published in here. There's really, really good information for other states if they're thinking about doing this, how they need to approach it. And they need to approach it from the idea that it's about shared pain, shared gain. And I mean, I think that's a great paper, Ellen. I thank you guys for doing that. I just, and what he did is they went out and they talked to some of the folks involved in WRI, and all of this stuff would not have been possible had it not been for the innovative approach that the division took many, many years ago to kind of bring this thing to head. And I just feel so fortunate that I was able to ride with Dean Mitchell to Dove Creek, Colorado, and be slapped in the face by Clay Brown. He did slap us. He told us nicely. He did feed us though, didn't he? He gave us some lunch. So. But anyway, hey, thanks. And then really, this is really about thanking everybody in this room for the work you do. And like I said, I feel really fortunate to have been at the right spot at the right time. So. And there is no such thing as luck. It's good planning, right? Okay. Well, I didn't realize that. That was just that. We were like, oh, wow, this is. What do you think? What's the next step? What do we want to do next? Mike? Bill?
Ben?
Rory?
Well, I think one of the things that would be interesting as technology advances is to understand what are the stressors on birds, to be able to actually measure the stress the birds are going through and understand how that relates to survivability. And the technology's not there yet, but it will be soon to be able to monitor, some of the vital rates on these birds to see what's happening.
The goal is to be able to study sage-grouse from the confines of your office and just click in them, and you can get their temperature, you can get their cortisol levels. I mean, it's pretty amazing. The technology. I mean, these callers, these transmitters still cost us. They cost us way too much yet. These GPS transmitters.
Yeah, but that's changing through time.
Yeah, it will.
Technology is advancing at a very rapid rate on a lot of these things, and
That's
10
what
years from now, this will be dinosaur.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it will be. It will be. But it's interesting when you look at the whole sage-grouse arena about how dogma gets trenched into some of these things, and you've got to have this. And even my discussions with Jack Conley and stuff, Jack's changed his philosophy about a lot of these ideas, and I mean, they're just things, I mean, it's pretty exciting, and there's a lot of sharp young folks that are coming up that know the technology, and they have the passion, and like I said, this work would not have been possible with the 40+ graduate students and postdocs and other stuff that have been working on it, because some of these statistics I'm okay, but R and the modeling and things going on now, and how some of these things translate into population, but the fact that you're able to have this experimental base of all the habitat work that's been done and all of this information about how these birds have responded, it just creates an exciting time for wildlife management. And I think the future's pretty bright. I mean, I am so impressed with these folks that are coming in, these graduate students, and how and they have the passion. People keep talking about, this younger generation, but I really see a lot of passion. I see a lot of commitment. I see a lot of folks that are really, really interested in the future and optimistic about the future. So, anyway, I'm humbled. Thank you.
Alan, how are you? I'm all right. How are you doing? Good. I'm not on the mailing list, so I didn't even know this was going on until Ben sent me a text.
You know what?
Says, where are you?
Put me your email there. I must have your wrong email.
Yeah, my old one went away when I retired.
Nice.
So let me give you two.
Go to your office? Oh, I already read your call. Yeah, I sent a bunch of stuff. They give me a little short notice, so I actually